Pseudonymous Blur Marketplace co-founder Pacman has revealed his identity. So in a series of tweets, he said he enjoyed the privacy of being pseudo, but since Blur's exponential growth, he feels it's time to share his identity publicly. CoinDesk used the details he provided to match his profile to Crunchbase and LinkedIn profiles, revealing his name as Tishan Roquer. Will, I'm going to pass this one off to you first. What do you think about this? Do you think it's almost necessary for these pseudonymous founders, co-founders to reveal their identity for the success of their projects?
Before we go there, just look at that resume we have on that tweet up, right? Like this guy has got it going on. He has a lot.
And he's so young.
I'm not qualified. I'm not qualified to even talk about him. He's just got a lot going on here. So he dropped out of high school to go through Y Combinator, studied math and computer science at MIT, received the Teal Fellowship to leave, and left MIT to start Namebase, and then he sold Namebase to Namecheap. That is quite a list of accomplishments. It looks like he's under 30, or at least I'm just guessing he is. That's pretty good. Pretty good. In terms of like being public in the space or not, I think this is actually sort of a good move when you become large enough. I think that Satoshi, when he left Bitcoin, sort of set a precedent, right? You either stick around and kind of reveal yourself so you can see if there's like a good reputation, or you leave the space entirely, you leave the project and you let it go off on its own, right? Because that's sort of like the legacy of all these crypto projects. And this guy chose to go public. I mean, there's definitely some concerns here for physical safety. That's a big reason why people choose to say anonymous or pseudonymous, I should really say. Yeah, that's a big reason. I think other reasons people have chosen for being pseudonymous have been more nefarious, right? Like we can go back to Chef Nami back in 2020, and there's whole stories about that. In this case, I think it was a good move, right? Like Blur is becoming really big. It's a big project. And I think a lot of these token projects out there, really, they're like kind of companies at the end of the day. And we have company names and faces and about pages for a reason. So I sort of like this. Zach, over to you.
Yeah, he's 24, 25. So yeah, definitely a young king out here doing big things. I wanted to say on his website, the one that stood out to me, in 2014, we'd have to do the math on that one. He moved from Boston to San Francisco to work as a full-time engineer at Teespring instead of doing my junior year of high school. So this guy has been out for a while and is super thoughtful about what he's building over at Blur. Blur seized upon a really interesting thesis and just executed immaculately, right? Their thesis was there's no marketplace in NFTs serving the professional power user. And we need to build a marketplace that serves that user, and we're going to do that. They ultimately did a bunch of good brinksmanship on the issue of NFT royalties, forcing OpenSea to basically come more in line with what they were doing. There was this whole back and forth about people, blocking collections on Blur versus those on OpenSea. You can get into the details of it. But really what it comes down to is someone who had a thesis and someone who stuck to that thesis and someone who shipped something that now is unseating OpenSea when it comes to daily volume, which is crazy because for the longest time, OpenSea has been probably the strongest incumbent in the space. All through the NFT bull cycle, they were the only game in town. We saw these other ones come along, kind of get wrecked by like all the wash trading going along with different token incentives. And Blur, on the other hand, sort of saw this and said, okay, we can offer sort of a better model. And they ultimately kind of won out, which is pretty remarkable. So, with this guy revealing his identity, I think that's, it's interesting. It's interesting that you can build a prominent company in this space with only being, Pacman. You can use a pseudonym. I think that's a great thing about crypto. I hope some of that ethos stays. But I guess, Will, to your point, right? Like pseudonymity can mask suspect behavior in some instances. In this one, I don't think that's necessarily the case, but hey, who knows? I don't know. Jen, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think it's important for stories to come out like this to counteract the stories that come out about people like Do Kwon who, had pseudonymous personalities, brought a project to life that didn't work, and then, never said anything about it, then went on to do something that was very similar. Again, there are good actors in the space that are remaining pseudonymous for good reasons. Unfortunately, I think that people like Do Kwon have kind of ruined it for the good people. I want to go back to just, celebrating this young king. He went through Y Combinator at 17 years old, and I love that he is giving OpenSea a run for their money. I know we're not propping up gods in this space anymore, and so I'm going to leave it there, but I support him. Will?
I love how we're all jumping around the word pseudonymous like it's a landmine, because it's not really fun to say on live TV. It's a long word. It's a long word. But I think it's an important word here, and it's important in crypto. It sort of brings like the fun of crypto out, right? Like, there's a lot of boring jobs out there, but it's hard to have a boring day in crypto because there's like weird things like this. Like, you might be working with a pseudonymous founder who's like 24, dropped out of MIT to go work at Y Combinator and launch this NFT project. That's exciting. You don't see that every day. And I like to applaud these stories because I think he did make an ethical decision that has ramifications for his own life, right? Like, there is a physical threat to people in crypto because it is digital cash, right? We see a lot of instances in crypto's history where people get sim swapped, or people get like wrench attacked. There's been swattings, things like that. And that's why people say stay pseudonymous, right? They don't want to be like part of that, and they try to hide themselves. But if you step out and show like, this is who I am, this is what the project's about, I think your project has a little bit more legs. I think Bitcoin only got so far in a lot of ways because Satoshi did leave the project. He said like, this is got off, it's fine, it's working, we have other people stepping in now, time for me to step back and for like the community to take over. I think you sort of have those two paths, right? You can either step back, or you can step out into sunshine, let everyone know who you are. And that's the only way for things really to start growing past that. I'll leave it there. Zach, throw it over to you.
All right, let's talk about the developers. You guys ready to talk about the developers? One of my favorite gifs of all time is the Steve Ballmer developers from the early 90s. It was true back in the early days of Web 2, and it's true here in the present day of Web 3.